fixing to talk about comparing and contrasting. And when we compare and we contrast, we're telling how things are alike and how things are different in a story. And we're going to use our story Moving Day to help us with this. And I have a Venn diagram, and we're going to think back in our story of the character's old shell and his new shell, and then what do both shells have in common. What I'm going to do, and guys, by comparing and contrasting, it can help you to understand the story better. And so I'm going to go back, and I want us to look at the very beginning of our story. I'm going to read the first page, and we'll look at the first shell. So I want you to look at what Miss Williams is fixing to read. It says, this shell is snug. This shell is tight. I will find a shell that's just right. All right, so that was at the beginning. That's how he felt. And then, let's go back and let's look to see what happens when he finds the new shell. It says on page 40, it's not too snug, it's not too tight. This shell is the one that's right. All right, now I want us to compare and contrast from at the beginning, his first shell, to when he found the last shell. And we're going to take a look and see how they're alike and how they're different. All right, well, let's first think about the old shell. Can we think about some things about this old shell? Let me go back to page 17. The old shell. What was wrong with the old shell? If you want to look and get your book out, you can turn to page 17. I'll give you a minute to do that. If you'll turn, you can turn to page 17, and let's take a look and see what was wrong with that shell, the old shell. We can come up with some words, and I'll think if you can come up with some words to tell about the old shell. All right, let's think of some words that might tell about the old shell. Well, one thing I read is it says this shell is snug. It's kind of snug. Doesn't have much room. So I think that might be a good thing to tell about the old shell. The old shell was snug. So I'm going to write it on the side of our Venn diagram that says old shell. Let's look and see what else does it say. Read on and see if you can find another word that might describe it. This shell is tight. I will find a shell that's right. It says it's tight. I bet you said tight would be another way to describe the old shell. Tight. So guys, if it's snug and it's tight, I think it might be too what? Maybe small? It must be too small. I can just take my clues from tight and snug and know that it's a little small. Now, let's go to page 40 in our book. So if you'll turn to where he finds the new shell. It's near the end of the story. Turn to page 40. It says, it's not too snug. It's not too tight. this shell is the one that's right. So if it's not too snug and it's not too tight, this shell must be what? Not smaller, but it must be what? Think about it. It's not smaller, it must be, the new shell must be, I bet you're saying, bigger. It is bigger. So this is how they're different. The new shell's bigger. The old shell was snug and tight and small. And he kept saying he wanted one that was just right. The old shell was not right, was it? But the new shell, it was just what? Yes, it was just right. So I'm going to put it under new shell. So, we know how they're different. Now, both shells, there is something that's the same about both shells. And I want you to look at it. Look at this one. Look how it looks. And look at this one. Do you see something that's the same? This one? This one? Maybe? Do you think it's the same color? They look like the same color, don't they? So I'm going to put same. I don't have as much room to write there, but same color. And is there something else that's the same? Maybe the same there's one of our digraphs. Shape. Yes, same shape. So I'm going to put same shape. So the two shells were different and they were also the same. So being that, guys, they're the same shape, the same color, he must like that about those shells. He must like it, so they're the same color and the same shape, but the new shell was bigger. And I think, see, this is what I can think by being able to compare and contrast. I think he chose this new shell because it was a lot like his old one, but maybe just a little bit bigger. So he had room and more comfortable room to grow. So do you see how comparing and contrasting can help you understand stories when you're reading? All right, now what I want you to do is, if you haven't already read Moving Day aloud to someone, I want you to do that, and then I want you to do Practice Workbook page 11. It's in your packet, and then you'll also need to do some iReady reading, about 10 to 15 minutes of that. All right, I'll see you back later in a little bit.